Hello, so this video is Playing with Pleasure, the history of sex toys. So, let's watch.
Archaeologists like Indiana Jones. You crawl into a cave not visited by anyone else for millennia. In the fading light of your oil lamp, you see something in a corner. Seems to have been made by man. A tool, perhaps, a statue, a valuable scepter. You get close to the intriguing object, then blow the dust and cobwebs from its surface. It's a dildo! A stone dildo. Sharp. 19.2 centimeters long. Could be longer. Dear viewers, dear bedfellows, welcome to It's History and a perusal of some of the world's finest artifacts. My name's Guy, and I have made a bet with the team that I can get through this episode without innuendo. I fear I may already have gone arse over tit. No, this is a serious discussion about erotic sex toys, and we must penetrate deep into the past. In the Hohlefels cave in the Swabian Jura, for example, archaeologists found what academics would call a stone phallus. In fact, it's the oldest known phallus in the world at 28,000 years. It's 19.2 centimeters long and most definitely looks like a willy. What precisely it was used for may surprise you. Probably not what you're thinking, as the nicks on its side indicate that the phallus was used as a weapon to whack around someone's head, rather as many of us have done over the years with our tools. Don't deny it. In Greek antiquity, however, the dildo was most definitely in circulation. Take the 2,400-year-old play Lysistrata, for example, by Aristophanes. The women of Athens and Sparta have had enough of their men constantly fighting each other. They have a think about what might tempt their men away from war, what they might miss a little bit more than bloodletting. Yes, sexual favours. So the women withdraw to the Acropolis in Athens, and the men have to stay outside. Each party is desperate for the other. In well-chosen verse, the leader of the women advises her compatriots to use an olisbos, as they were then called. Anyway, it serves its purpose. The women hold out and the men settle for peace. Then they have a massive orgy. Olisboi, plural, for and the men have to stay outside. Each party is desperate for the other. In well-chosen verse, the leader is most definitely in circulation thinking, as the nicks on its side indicate that the phallus was used as a weapon to whack around someone's head, rather as many of us have done over the years with our tools. Don't deny it. In Greek antiquity, however, the dildo was most definitely in circulation. Take the 2,400-year-old play Lysistrata, for example, by Aristophanes. The women of Athens and Sparta have had enough of their men constantly fighting each other. They have a think about what might tempt their men away from war, what they might miss a little bit more than bloodletting. Yes, sexual favours. So the women withdraw to the Acropolis in Athens, and the men have to stay outside. Each party is desperate for the other. In well-chosen verse, the leader of the women advises her compatriots to use an olisbos, as they were then called. Anyway, it serves its purpose. The women hold out and the men settle for peace. Then they have a massive orgy. Olisboi, plural for my grammar friends, were readily available back then. For a bit of a laugh and a nod to Aristophanes, soldiers often made a present of one to their womenfolk before heading off to war. They hoped that the trusty olisbos would be enough to scratch an itch and distract their ladies from the temptation to prowl. The dildo was, through and through, a means of pleasure. But later editions of the play for study in schools were surprisingly sparing on the detail, as Christian values latched on and the dildo faded from the limelight. The teachings of the three monotheistic religions at the beginning of the Common Era called for sexual temperance. Some interpretations even viewed physical pleasure as sinful, and objects for the enhancement of pleasure obviously have no place in such constructs. Courts were empowered to punish immoral behaviour, which was associated with witches who liaised with the devil. He, of course, had a penis made of ice. There's no way the Prince of Darkness could have had a real one, and from a theological perspective, it's a matter of debate whether angels and fallen angels had a penis at all. With modernity came the cleavage between the church and the courts, but the same moral precepts remained. After Luther, they became even stricter. Still today, American churches that lean in this religious direction are fierce opponents of sex toys. But out of an extremely tight corner came the invention of the vibrator. The search was on for a practical treatment for hysteria. Hysteria comes from the ancient Greek word for womb, hystera. The thinking was that all nervous diseases, including hysteria, were down to the womb. According to the teachings of the time, women were devoid of sex drive. The instruction in the 19th century then was not enjoy yourself, but go to the doctor. He would then carry out a clitoral massage, which would induce a so-called hysterical paroxysm. Quite what that meant is for you to decide. This procedure was carried out completely seriously, with the doctor standing as far as possible from the patient, who herself was covered in heavy towels and other means of protection. The procedure was also apparently quite demanding, so a helping hand was invented. Enter the Pulsicon, that both looked and functioned like a mechanical cake mixer. And then there was the Tremoussoir, also liable to rev up a lady. The world's first electrical vibrator entered service in 1880. Granville's hammer, named after its inventor, Dr. Granville, was available initially only for clinical use, but a domestic variant came out around 20 years later and was patented by the American company Hamilton Beach in 1902. It became a household object of the nature ascribed to tampons and sanitary towels today, something for the women, and generally not to be discussed at the dinner table. It disappeared in the 20s, before the 60s changed everything and sex toys came out big time. Books like The Joy of Sex and Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Sex sparked great interest. Sex therapists, a radically new profession for an extremely old problem, were advocates of anything that helped. Eastern literature was rediscovered. The Kama Sutra, hitherto hermetically sealed into cabinets that nobody opened in the deepest, darkest corners of the library vaults, now reached the masses. It mentions cock rings and strap-ons ad lib. Smart balls probably came from Asia too. In 1968, Hitachi launched the Magic Wand. It became the top recommendation of sex therapists such as Ruth Westheimer and Betty Dodson. It even became a magic wand of the sexual revolution. Concurrently, feminists criticized these toys as phallocentric, that took too little regard of female erogenous zones. After a while, new studies of female sexuality led to the development of new devices. Film and television had a big impact on removing the taboos from the toys. The series Sex and the City mentions a vibrator called a rabbit. After the episode in question, it became a bestseller. A similar thing happened to Hitachi's Magic Wand that, in 2002, was sold out for a while after a mention in another episode. The sex toy industry has reached a new level of sales after the appearance of 50 Shades of Grey. Clearly, quite a few people have taken to setting up a playroom at home and being extremely brave. According to representative surveys in the USA, a good 50% of men and women use a vibrator or a dildo, either alone or together. In the gay community, the statistic is higher, at around 70%. Last year, Alexandra Fine and Janet Lieberman gathered $2 million through crowdfunding for the development of a new hands-free toy for pairs. Since 2010, an online sex shop in Holland has been selling to Muslim customers and offering erotica that complies with their religious guidelines. The only remaining restrictions these days affect sales. In some countries, like my very own England, you can't put a dildo in your shop window. Some countries forbid sex toys outright, like India. This might seem strange when you consider that India's Kama Sutra is still a leading light in the sexual universe. Find out more about this book of books by clicking here. People have invented quite a few interesting objects to add to sexual...
So that's it for this video. Sorry if I was a little distracting by walking around. Dad Rock's being a pain in my butt. So I hope you enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed listening. But watching.